No Kings at the Crossroads of B.B. King and Martin Luther King Boulevard. I attended the No Kings rally in Memphis Saturday, March 28th, 58 years exactly to the date of Martin Luther King's final march at almost the exact same location. As a curious observer of life, I can say I saw quite a bit, especially how a beautiful, powerful event of critical, peaceful positivity could be manufactured and maneuvered into the exact opposite from momentary media spectacle. I'm not pretending to be a lawyer or a city councilman here, but these are just some basic common sense human observations that the ground cameras might not have captured. None of this is personal towards any individual officers or the Memphis Police Department. I have family that works on the Memphis Police Department. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world. Or the mayor, or even the powers that be downtown. And I call them that to keep from calling them what I could. But this is just a quick observation, kind of a sky cam view, looking down on the chessboard at the strategy and tactics of submersive urban warfare, maneuvering and positioning a baited trap to exploit a legal technicality to override all logistical practicality, to maximize the minimum and minimize the maximum of the real issues at hand. It's nothing personal because this is just basic warfare strategy that as progressives collectively bargaining for basic human rights, we have to be so aware, strategic, and mindful so we don't take the bait on these traps. When you're dealing with regressives, everything is a baited trap because they hold extreme power, but they don't hold evidence or the truth on their side on seems like any issue. So they are purposely forcing the confrontations out of the courts of evidence and into the streets where weapons overrule the evidence. This is ruthless gang rule. Every rally I've been to, except this one, had a pretty strong presence along the perimeter, just observing and keeping the boundaries safe. All attendees and most of the speakers thank law enforcement for their participation. Oddly, at this event, there was almost no police, which was cool because it was a family event with music and arts. You know, everyone having a joyful occasion with very powerful speakers and messages of community strength. Nobody was carrying assault rifles, handguns, flagpoles, or clubs, or bear spray like so many of our critics on the regressive side do. See, they want you to think, everybody is confused, panicked, and as deranged as they are. There was no counter-protesters or resistors anywhere at the rally or the march. And believe me, I was watching every rooftop, especially Memphis this time of year. But without the police providing sort of a general barrier or boundary, I believe this was strategic to create the illusion of consent that we were kind of being allowed to move with a certain respectable freedom. The Beale Street FedEx Forum area is a world-famous tourism location, well known for heavy pedestrian traffic, along and in the streets. And this was exactly what a real peaceful tourist visit looks like. If they really wanted us not on the public street, they could have provided a hard police line at the end of Beale Street. A handful of officers and 30 feet of bike racks would have prevented all their future concerns and saved the taxpayers millions in manpower, litigation, and lawsuits. Money that could have went to the beautiful children's hospitals of Memphis. Progressive liberals have never had the privilege to even dream of attacking or running a law enforcement line, much less beating them into the pavement with clubs, flagpoles, or bear spray. No, we would have respected their hard line and went right back down Beale Street, right back to the park. The march was the least important part of the whole event anyway. And I say, if they're going to act like this, don't even have the walk around. We have the truth and evidence. We don't need to walk around. Whatever the case, the crowd wasn't stationary. like posted up in one spot, like in front of a courthouse or something. No bridge or limited access road was blocked. Any area blocked was going to be clear in a couple minutes. This entire crowd's number one priority is healthcare. Believe me, if an emergency vehicle like a fire truck or an ambulance needed to get through, we were going to be the first people to clear a path. But why not stop us right at the end of Beale if street clearance was your real intention? You had thousands of people assembled walking down Beale Street, and you didn't plan for any containment in place? Do you really expect us to believe that? On any Saturday afternoon on Beale Street, there's usually police, fenced entrances getting in place for the night, much more security than this time. I remember noticing that. Most of the attendees, myself included, hadn't read the permit. And since there was no boundary in place, we just pretty much assumed it was okay. The powers that be downtown waited until after the final turn at the Crossroads, turning left off of B.B. King Boulevard onto Martin Luther King Boulevard. The last couple hundred yards of the march, way too far at this point to reverse back to Beale Street if needed, to even begin addressing the situation. Even then, at any point, again, if they had provided a hard line, we would have respected it and not crossed. Now that we are trapped in position, this next part is where the real baiting comes into play. Instead of a hard line, they sent staggered lone police cars up the middle of the street into the front of the march. I don't remember the exact words, but it was basically to disassemble and get off the street. But coming out of nowhere, like one car at a time, with no trouble or tension anywhere, the people couldn't really understand what was going on. It felt more like parade props or a joke. And if I could be polite, most of the people were older white suburbanites who never been conditioned to navigate this type of on-the-spot legal exploitation. Now they just want to get back to the park safely, less than 100 yards away, and the only route off the street anyway between all the buildings. Why block the only route back to the park? Don't forget, our chairs, blankets, baby strollers, and kids' toys are all still back at the park. And the city knew right where we were going. I knew exactly the trap they were setting. Luckily, we slipped by the single cars very quickly instead of getting hung up, as I saw a sea of blue lights suddenly activated from around the corner, closing in behind us, trapping us in between the buildings, in what could be called, to use the parlance of our times, a kill box. That's what was on my mind. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and B.B. King, America's real kings, taught me to always be polite, courteous, obey the law, and when the incident escalates, when the deal goes down, you're the criminal, not me. Before cameras, this didn't mean much. But moving forward with cameras, this is going to make all the difference. So I moved to the sidewalk as close to the street as I could be, legally well within my rights. But technically, attendees are now disobeying basically non-credible orders. This is the tactic of purposefully orchestrating the authorization to trigger escalation. Thank the universe it didn't work, because everyone was peaceful and just kind of swiftly strolled down the street. It would seem to the curious observer that they got really desperate at the very end, that someone inside the power structure couldn't handle the event ending in such a peaceful and positive way. They had to jump the last few feet of the march in a desperate attempt to create a media spectacle, and they were willing to gamble public safety disaster to get it. Literally at the crossroads of the park, individual police physically assaulted people. And the films can tell you exactly who did what at this point better than I can. but it was unjustifiably got very dangerous and completely insightful and escalatory. And the street was going to be clear in another 60 seconds. Instead, they manufactured a breach, forcing physical altercation, practically orchestrating very possibly complete public disaster, all to delay and create a media spectacle of lawless disorder, of blocking the street for a couple of hours. The news vans and crews, who were nowhere to be seen prior, suddenly showed up to report the exact opposite scene of the entire rally all day. If anything here is personal, it's a tribute to the bravery and commitment of Tennessee State Representative Justin Pearson. The bravery he did and commitment he displayed running directly into the breach at a moment that was impossible to calculate, calibrate, or estimate the danger of. He knew he was basically the only person who had the respect of the people, who was going to be able to contain the emotional explosion, as well as collectively bargain with a megaphone in the middle of chaos to get essentially hostages released. I was standing right there, not something I saw on TV. I literally gave Representative Pearson a silent fist bump as he was talking to a constituent back at the park, at what he had every right to assume was the conclusion of a peaceful, successful march. Where he stood in the park, his view of the developments of Martin Luther King Boulevard were pretty much obstructed by the FedEx Forum. When we fist bumped, it sort of pulled his focus away from the conversation, towards the direction of the Crossroads beginning to escalate. I will never forget that fist bump. Like activating a superhero with a flash of lightning out of the sky, he immediately ran directly towards the breach. All suit, tie, and church shoes of this dude was going in. And when his wife saw him go in, she immediately went in. I didn't know what to do other than follow them and try to protect them. I was so worried that here they were with no security or physical protection whatsoever. I couldn't even protect the man's wife in a moment of chaos, something I'm most known for. So the very least I can do is at least now provide this eyewitness account. When you see these lines break, the ripple of human bodies forced into motion of escalation and confrontation, it's impossible to calculate, calibrate, or estimate the extent of what is about to happen, especially in proximity of inflamed emotions and military-style gear. What he did is definitely one of the bravest things I've ever seen in my life. I say all this because when you read in the papers, protesters blocked public street for hours, it's a complete misdirection and exploitation of what happened. Exploiting a legal technicality to override all logistical practicality. I mention all this not to attack police department or anybody personally, but to remind my progressive brothers and sisters out here how strategic and careful we have to be. Regressives can make any mistake they want. Progressives can't afford one misstep anywhere. People are human. No matter how disciplined, tempered, or trained they are, if you assault them and you inflame them with flashpoint methods, it becomes very difficult or next to impossible to control all these people in a sudden panic confusion. Regressives need this explosion. Progressives need to help each other be so strategic and mindful not to take the bait and play right into the hands of these traps. Stay focused, stay woke. Lightnin Malcolm reporting to you down here in the United States of Mississippi.